I'm so pleased I'm finally having the whatever it takes to record and share my screen. Um, I want to just, for the last time in this collaborative series, shout out to the League of Women Voters and the American Association of University Women, Cindy Bell and Lynn Gore, and hand it to you for your cameo moments. Cindy?
Hey, all right. My name's Cynthia Bell, and I'm representing the League of Women Voters of the Mid-Hudson region. Sponsoring this program is in keeping with our league's mission to educate and advocate, and we are proud to sponsor this work. And thank you.
My name is Lynn Gore, and I'm president of the Association of University Women, American Association of University Women, AAUW of Kingston area, which is a national and state organization since 1881. And our goal is to advance gender equity for all women and girls. And we support research, education, advocacy, and that's that. So I'm glad to be here.
And we have a nice little group of women leaders, I see, which is pretty cool. So I'm Melissa Everett. I'm Executive Director of Sustainable Hudson Valley. And I have a dilemma because every one of you has heard my intro 3 or 4 times. And so I think I will summarize it briefly and then splice an earlier version in with recording. But just, part of our purpose doing these programs is that it's become clear that too many people of the nearly 60% of us who are alarmed or concerned about climate change, too many of us don't realize that we are that majority and don't realize that the science dictates urgency and seriousness, but that the progress that we've collectively made in bending the curve really is a source of hope. And this is kind of twisted, but 10 years ago, we were on track for 17 to 20 degrees Celsius of temperature increase, just completely off the charts. Now we're only on track for maybe 5 or 6 degrees. It's still untenable, but the fact that humanity has collectively bent that curve is really something pretty stunning. So today, what I want to share, I think we can do it in a timely enough way that we'll have plenty of space for discussion and for sharing our direct experience here. The aspect of the Regional Climate Action Roadmap and Toolkit that focuses in on capturing community benefits. And those are multiple. They are economic development, they are environmental justice, they are education and training opportunities, and they are resilience building opportunities. So I'm gonna share my screen. And I'm gonna just note that the climate law is an unprecedented opportunity to turn the corner in terms of emissions, that there's been a lot of confusion and pushback, that the scoping plan was designed to include and support everyone, with even an Office of Just Energy Transition at the Department of Labor. And so the idea of the benefits of helping to evolve our economy are not shabby. So the roadmap is a critical path analysis, and I hope you've had a chance to just poke around in it. We're doing the last round of tweaks before a more ambitious outreach campaign. But it's designed to hopefully support local action and also make the case for regional collaboration. So we are gonna go down to part about capturing community benefits. And we're gonna do the slideshow. In the last few sessions, we have talked about scaling up renewable energy industries, sustainable transportation. We've talked about the 12% of our climate footprint that is just in handling materials, taking trash to the landfill. I was reminded, we actually truck invasive plants to the landfill in central New York. Sometimes. Every one of those changes is an opportunity for economic development and for inclusive economic development. I'm going to just reorient my slides for just a moment. So, like, everybody take a breath or take a bite if you want to. Sorry, something just defaulted in a way that I wasn't expecting. Okie doke. So I think everybody was, or just about everybody was with us yesterday talking about climate resilience and how that especially is about reinvesting in our places. And we've talked about how much climate action requires reinvesting locally, not relying on goods shipped from halfway around the world. So rebuilding local production ability, not shipping stuff to the landfill, relying on increased remanufacturing, reuse, things like the Reuse Innovation Center that we're excited to be supporting for Ulster County. And that's also a strategy for reinvesting in the communities that most need and deserve extra support. And you remember we talked about the climate law having a requirement, not just a goal, but a requirement, all the funding streams bring 35 to 40% of investment in so-called disadvantaged communities. That's kind of a condescending word, but it's in the law, so we're stuck with it. We did a lot of listening to people, as we were doing this 2021-2, when there was an awful lot of ferment, a lot of people finding their voice around environmental justice, and we did a lot of listening and learned the phrase "nothing about us without us" and how important it is, not just to bring clean technology to consumers of color, but to help everybody be more of a producer and have more of a sense of agency. One of the people we talked with was actually an African-American man who had worked in the foundation world and was now on a bunch of nonprofit boards. Very sophisticated guy who said, asked a question that just set the tone for me for doing this work. He said, I have no doubt that New York State will figure out how to move electrons in a different way. We will get the renewable energy transition done sooner or later. It may be rough, but we'll get it done. My question is, who will own the assets? Will it be the same people and the same companies owning the assets in the new economy or not? And that is really what has defined our thinking. You know, environmental justice is not just about economics. It's not just about ownership. It's about, freedom from police brutality and voter suppression, all the stuff. But we've leaned in on the part about ownership and agency and kind of setting the agenda at the local level because there's such a huge opportunity. And I have spoken with enough people in local government in the so-called disadvantaged communities to know that they would love support in capturing these opportunities. So NYSERDA spent quite a while working with stakeholders from major environmental justice organizations and community interests to come up with a definition of priority communities based on demographics, based on history, based on vulnerability to things like floods and heat island effect. And we talked about some of this yesterday when we talked more about resilience. So we've got a map and we've got a lot of options, but certainly this backbone of the Hudson Valley, Kingston, Poughkeepsie, Newburgh, Beacon, down into Spring Valley, where one of my workforce lives and wants to start a charter school. So to me, it's exciting to be looking at all the energy already working on this and how our regional partnership could be supportive. So, I said in the opening riff, climate change is an invitation to reinvent our places. And we talked about renewable energy siting. We talked about decarbonizing buildings. We talked about access to transportation, turning waste into wealth, and optimizing land use. And I'll just kind of share a few high points of what we've uncovered about the economic development options. So, the renewable energy industry a couple of years ago acknowledged that it had an environmental justice and a gender justice issue. Diversity, equity, and inclusion was very much not on the radar, and they have been leaning into getting that act together. There are companies, one of them is called Block Power, that are minority owned and devoted specifically to helping building decarbonization and renewable energy businesses start up and access capital. Transportation, we talked a little bit in previous sessions about the state climate law is and even some subsequent governor executive orders are pushing EV adoption and charging, and that's all good. We've worked in training dealerships to be comfortable selling. We call that acceleration through coordination because all those pieces are needed. But transit and access to transit and not only making the buses and trains clean, but helping them to go where people need to get is a real challenge. And our counties are doing the most creative work they can. But in clean transportation, little opportunity space also for equity and justice and diverse ownership. NYSERDA funded what they called the Clean Transportation Prize a couple years ago. And it was around bringing clean transportation to where people need it. And one of the companies that was awarded $10 million prize to get started is called Dollar Ride, and they're down in Queens. But they're creating a scalable business model for, first of all, for converting conventional shuttle vehicles to electric, which it's been like a niche and industry. It's very hard, but it's becoming more established. So that is a great thing. And then the model is franchise ownership and supporting people in the community in owning the transportation systems that serve the community. So, all of this is jobs and business opportunities. And sorry. Yeah, I wanted to connect that to the idea of reinventing our places just a little more, because the history of environmental injustice has been it has chopped up places, it has made places hard to inhabit. As we talked about before, um, if you're living in a basement apartment, you're pretty flood vulnerable. And if you can't afford an air conditioner, you're extra heat vulnerable. But there's been, the history of environmental injustice has been very much around who controls decisions on the land. And so now the work of climate resilience is starting. Groundwork Hudson Valley is one of my favorite organizations in Yonkers, because what they do is sit with people in the most stressed neighborhoods and look at the maps. Where's the heat island, and where's the pavement, and where could there be trees, and figure out together how to design neighborhoods that work better for climate security and just for living in. And Groundwork just got quite a few $1 million grant to develop a landscape and nursery and horticulture workforce development program. That's a combination of classroom training and paid internships to move a significant number of people into that industry. And so this comes from our friends at the Project for Public Spaces, and it's just a real reminder of what we can do as we're looking in a neighborhood, where to put the heat, where to market heat pumps, where there might be space for district geothermal, where we need the heat island dealt with, where we could increase bus stop signage, and bikeways, just all the stuff that we can really be thinking not just about buying and funding the hardware, but where to put it so that people have a say about how the neighborhood is connected and what goes on in the public space. I hope that's making sense, but I think it's an opportunity that we all need to digest, but that a lot can be done with. So we've been working, as we've discussed, but I want to just kind of reinforce it, with public libraries to anchor what we're calling resilience hubs, and to help people be well educated about the climate issue and climate opportunities. Those hubs could be at healthcare facilities, they could be at commuter exchange points, town and village centers, but places where we really invest in climate resilience. And we're excited that we've been working with the library systems, which in turn have brought in a few dozen libraries to start doing this work on the ground. We talked about the disadvantaged communities, and I think I've mentioned, but I want to reinforce it. The levels of funding are not just from the climate law, but 20 billion was just approved by the federal government, a fund called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And it's moving through partnerships of lenders. Many of them are green banks, including New York's, that in turn, the way they qualified for that money was to have plausible plans for how to leverage that money to generate, co-investments of 5 to 7%. So 20 billion with a B and then leverage is a significant amount of money. And it is mainly for the built environment, for housing and commercial buildings But commercial districts, for example, could really utilize that money for visible reinvestment. And I will forget if I don't mention it. We are going to offer a webinar not related particularly to the series, but just an opportunistic one-shot lunch webinar at noon on April 26th with everything we can uncover about that funding. So that's available, but only communities can define how to leverage those investments. And I think, you know, we may think we're jaded about community engagement, but I have a feeling that engaging around this agenda, it's not just one project or another, but really a broader agenda, could be pretty exciting. So that gets me to the economic development piece. You know, we all love the green economy. I have concluded that there are 4 green economies, and I want to talk about each of them a little bit because, you know, as we start to bring it into focus, how we think about it is going to matter. And I, you know, want to shout out especially to the opportunities that are emerging in our region. Significantly, the Ulster County Center for Workforce Innovation, which is really looking at how to create holistic supports for the workforce and how to offer the right training for people who want to go into a trade and to have career mobility. So decarbonization is the most obvious, and this is, you know, from a NYSERDA study. Their modeling is telling us that by 2030, the net new jobs would be 189,000, and that is after you subtract the jobs in propane delivery and gas pumping and stuff that will, you know, certainly decline. But that's a net increase, so that's not shabby. The second is the bioeconomy, and there's starting to be organized research and planning and policy work. SUNY out in Syracuse has created a center for the bioeconomy. And, you know, as we've talked about, natural systems sequester carbon, they are so important, and managing them sustainably is so important. So wood waste is on par with fossil fuel facilities globally as a generator of greenhouse gas as the waste rots in the forest. So processing that, making biochar for soil enhancement is an example of something we're just beginning to recognize. Low carbon building materials, just even structural timber, forest products broadly. And there's beginning to be very efficient pyrolysis, thermal processing of organics that doesn't leave residue, that is, again, a way to make biochar and do something with our organic waste, and the whole local farm and food economy. And so there's clearly already investment in that. Places like the Hudson Valley Agribusiness Development Corporation and the Farm Hub and so forth. But it's getting ready to mature, I believe. Circular economy, we talked about yesterday, day before. The opportunities are so huge and they're so ripe. Building materials, right now, construction debris from New York City is landfilled in Greene and Columbia counties, and that makes me crazy. Reclaiming and reusing building materials is a huge opportunity. Upcycling textiles is a huge opportunity. Ground glass going into low carbon concrete. I mean, all this stuff. It's sectors that have been kind of fending for themselves that our economic development strategists should be working on very methodically. And finally, and I thought I was the only person thinking about this, but I came up with, I'm so brilliant, the resilience economy. What's that? You know, it is drones that pick up debris after an accident, after an emergency. It's, you know, I'm sorry, battery powered everything. You know, it's all the stuff that helps us to be more secure and to recover from disasters. I just saw a study that there are 800 publicly traded companies now that identify as part of this economy. So we can dive and learn more. So I've started saying in the environmental community that environmentalists need to get really good at understanding economic development, that we're at the cusp of where this stuff really is taking off as industries. And I'm irritating some people, but I think I'm piquing some curiosity. So these people in the picture are employees at the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, vsjf.org. I love them. They're a more than 20-year-old organization. Their co-founder is now a program officer at the Ford Foundation because they've figured out some stuff. They are about sustainable development of Vermont industries. They've done forest products and, you know, plant-based materials and all kinds of stuff that makes sense for their rural economy. They work not with companies, which is what most economic developers do. They work with industries. So they require the company leadership to come together as a group and think about, you know, beyond the competition, beyond the secrecy, what do they need together? So they work with things like, you know, supply chain and enabling policies and workforce development and investors for multiple companies. And they, one of my favorite things that they do is they'll take on a strategic plan for an industry and they'll work it for 3 or 4 years. And they'll have very rigorous performance metrics. They do a lot of supporting research before they launch these projects, but they meet their goals and they get done, and they don't kind of grub the funding to do the same thing forever. They move on. So they're an example of what we've discovered. I'll talk about in a bit. It's called a collective impact coalition. And it's a way that partners can work together without losing their independence. So put a pin in that. And I'm just gonna go into the one other piece that we delved into at the roadmap in terms of capturing benefits is that the need and opportunity for education around this stuff is huge. And, you know, we identified 2 strategies: issue literacy for civic engagement. That's kind of what we're doing with this sort of stuff. And then job and business readiness. And we are doing the research around what these emerging industries are and what they're going to need. So, you know, we do Sustainable Hudson Valley coordinates with Climate Reality, with Citizens Climate Lobby, and a number of other organizations, and with the Climate Smart Communities folks. We do an annual conference for everyone to stay on top of what's going on, and that will be in the first half of June at SUNY New Paltz. But also work to infuse climate literacy and climate themes into, you know, the entire educational system, this stream. Ed Lawson, who's one of our collaborators and member of our board, came up with science, technology, I think it's renewal and restoration or something like that, and then engineering, arts, and math. But it's kind of continuously inventing what we need to learn and, you know, how to grow the whole person. There's training going on for classroom teachers out of the Mid-Hudson Teacher Center. There's a Duchess Bosse's Center for Climate and Sustainability Education, kind of in early stages, but I'm rooting for it. And I mentioned the Ulster County Center for Workforce Innovation. So there's a lot of economic clout even in the educational side of things. So let's see what we've got here. As far as bringing the roadmap work forward, I've shared these projects with you. These are varying degrees of ripe, but there's 4 or 5 organizations working with local planners to be sure they are identifying the best renewable energy sites, and then working with Central Hudson's grid people to begin to understand how that siting can align with their upgrade planning. I've mentioned the libraries as resilience hubs, and in a number of the communities that you all represent, the public libraries are way into this. I do think that a green economy initiative modeled on the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund it would be my like dream project to get that going. Transportation, we're at least going to get the people from Dollar Ride that I talked about up for a visit at some point in the spring, and hopefully for a ride on the Solaris, which I think you all know about, the first solar powered Coast Guard inspected boat on the passenger boat on the Hudson. So we're at least going to do that. And so we're evolving, we're deepening our understanding, but we've got a good foundation, I think. I hope you have had a chance to poke around the roadmap website. I hope that you will, share it further, share your candid feedback. It'll change a little bit in the next 4 or 5 days, and then it'll settle down. But how can we all work together on this? Because this was a labor of love by a few of us in order to create a platform for more of us. So endorsing the vision, committing in your own work to real strong 2030 and 2040 timelines, whether you are decarbonizing your home or your local government. If your work is related, lean into projects that are aligned with the roadmap, or offer your support to the ones we're doing. Be part of all the education and outreach, or whatever you can handle. We can do these presentations for your community or your organization, and we are going to delve further into this notion of a collective impact coalition. They have been formed around, basically moving the needle on really challenging problems. So it could be a city coalition to deal with youth obesity, or a statewide coalition to tackle gun violence. They have typically 5 characteristics: common agenda, and in this case, implementing New York's and Mother Nature's climate goals, shared performance metrics, that you know if you're making progress or not, mutually reinforcing activities, but not in a way that binds organizations or limits what they can do. Just, you do this part, we'll do that part, those guys will do that part. Continuous communication, and then a backbone support organization. And so we are learning. We have a small group within our stakeholder coalition who've been reading up and talking to the experts and talking to Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund especially. And we will see where it goes. But that's what we've got. And I hope it has tied together, especially, you series fans, my God. Let me stop screen sharing. And hope that the last 4 days have been enough mind candy to make it worth your time. Thank you.
So Melissa, I have a question. To what extent are you all working with, is SHV working with any Hinchy people on this collective impact coalitions piece?
We have recently gone to one of her fundraisers and chatted, and we are working on getting a meeting.
Okay.
If you have some offline guidance, that would be great. You know, we've been like the best kept secret in the world. We just like, we're so unobtrusive. We don't bother the legislature, but we're like, that's dumb.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I'm going to share this with my granddaughter who's at Middlebury, and has been a Hinchy intern and is working locally in Vermont over the summer on some projects, sustainability projects. I'm going to see what she knows about the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and yeah, I'll see if she has any. Okay.
That would be great. Thank you.
The league meets with Senator Hinchy's office every year, and you know, a couple words of advice. You know, don't expect to have a really long time to meet with her. Have your agenda, have your notes, and you know, share what your general things you're going to talk about. When she is the easiest of our legislators to meet with. As in when she's there, she's all there, she's on board. And so, and you know, they should all hear what we're, you know, doing here.
Oh
really.
yeah, no, it's like, all right, put some time into ripening it. It's ripe now.
And I think that people, it's time for us to, you know, we talk to the people that aren't her, you know, the ones that are not necessarily for this. And, you know, it's a listening thing.
So another person in the legislative sphere who is a real go-getter and would be totally up her alley would be Sarahana Shrestha.
Yes, and I've been at press conferences with her and I've talked a little bit about it. So we're going to make the round.
Great.
And I will say there are a couple of sources of seed funding that I've got my eye on that are plausible. And I think once we get that, and then we go to our legislators and say, we have credible partner organizations, we have some money to bake this and do it properly, then we give them a structure for helping us.
The other thing to look at is what bills are coming up, and what, you know, there's a whole list, and you can look at the list on the state Senate or Assembly website and get the numbers of these bills, so you can see if they're in progress or if they're, you know, sitting in committee forever.
Yeah, you know, we just put in our newsletter an encouragement for folks to support a couple of bills this session. One is the plastic reduction and recycling infrastructure law. The other is the Fashion Act. And so materials, you know, eating and drinking and consumer packaging materials is a bioeconomy sweet spot. And fashion and textile processing, a lot of the tech for, like, you know, separating the cotton from the spandex is just becoming really commercially viable. So there's a lot of what we're going to do with teasing out more of this, you know, detail on the economic development options is really share it in, you know, with our county and our community economic development planners, and good critical feedback so that we have their support as we push it forward.
I was happy to see the initiatives to work with as being a retired teacher, that kids are the best. I mean, if you can get them interested in something, and I know that so many of them are into the environment. My friends that are science teachers do wonderful things with them at Saugerties High School and all the high schools. And I think if you can tap into their enthusiasm and help, they'll be the ones that say to dad or mom, don't throw that in there, recycle it, you know. They're the ones. I'm happy to see that you're working with the BOCES and the different groups, because they're the future, and they're the ones, you know, you're talking to the choir here, but we need to get the kids and the college students involved and encourage them to go for it, you know?
They are really involved. I mean, I think we need to network those who are involved to share resources and celebrate the successes and help strengthen the stuff that's going on. Because, you know, when I do just a spitball level inventory of school districts where there's really great work happening, you know, I can personally think of dozens without scratching the surface. So anybody who's lurking who hasn't said much, want to say much, or anybody got an off the wall thought that they have been wondering if they could bring up?
Something I was thinking about yesterday, and sorry, I forgot to mention it yesterday. And I'm sure you know a lot about this, but I went to I work at IBM, and there is a sustainability whole education track, and I try to go to as many as I can. And one excellent one I went to really drove the point home of soil erosion and the importance of how do we mitigate that, you know, because, and the presenter was excellent, and I'm going to try and dig this presentation out and see if he'll speak at other places. He was so good, but he framed it as a question of, how did he say it? Something like, you know, what is, and I'm paraphrasing because so much happens, my head gets full. Something like, you know, what are we losing the most annually every year from exporting, or, you know, what valuable asset are we losing nationally the most of every year, whatever it was. And everyone was guessing in the chat, and it was soil. And I was so alarmed by this, knowing that, you know, if the focus is on, you know, local sustainable farming, and those of us who love our CSAs and you know, that's all we want, you know, to support them and everything. If we're losing this, you know, to me it's like gold. If we're losing this, gold is slipping through our fingers. How do we mitigate this? So I'm sure it's on your radar and Sustain HV.
Yes, but thank you for bringing it up. You know, New York has a soil health law. Several of the New England states do as well. And so there's funding for replenishing soil, but it's work, it's hard. And I want to just mention an area that we are exploring. I've mentioned in passing, but some of the soil enhancements that sequester more carbon also replenish soil. And one is biochar and another is rock dust. They call it enhanced rock weathering. And so there are, you know, there's a lot of homework that the environmental community has to do, because the way you make biochar is a technology called pyrolysis. It's an anaerobic heating. So it's not combustion, it's not incineration, but there are environmental groups that push back on it, thinking that it is and not quite having it straight. So we are working, we've actually got a request for information up on our website for anybody or any organization that wants to be learning more about soil enhancements for carbon sequestration, because we're being mentored by a group in the Southwestern United States that is doing these very public, transparent demonstration projects, like citizen science, help communities get familiar with all this stuff. But I mean, you know, you look at the Amazon historically, and they've had this incredibly deep and rich soil because they have kind of indigenous ways of making biochar. So Gail Lindstrom, hello. Speak. Unmute yourself, madam. Unmute yourself and turn up your sound.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm on my phone because my computer died and I don't know how to do this very well. But anyway, I
You're
love
good.
the idea about supporting these youth groups or other groups and the library hubs, the more I'm really seeking getting people together to support each other. And I remember years ago, Thomas Berry, I heard him speak like 40 years ago, said that he didn't even bother with the people that don't understand any of this. Sort of like Catherine Hayhoe was like, don't waste your time on the 7% dismissives. You might want to work with the people that are in the middle, but mainly support the people out there with the energy to keep their energy going so they don't burn out. And I think when you said that about, you know, these groups and incentives and awards for creating contests for creating this and that with youth and high schools and colleges or wherever is really a way to keep that momentum and spark going.
Preach
That's it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Melissa, I just wanted to point out, there's a couple of questions in the chat, and one of them was,
Oh, yes, net jobs is statewide.
and I wrote down while that question came up, she's talking about the New York State or regional 189,000 new
Yes,
jobs.
yeah, it's a
Right.
NYSERDA clean energy sector jobs study, and I'll follow up with her.
Okay, and there was one other. Oh, the purple areas on the map, the disadvantaged.
Yes. Yeah, so there was close to a year of consultation and looking at data and looking at community organizations' priorities to define areas that were low income, predominantly minority, and had other kind of indicators of vulnerability. And you can read the backstory on the NYSERDA website, but it was a methodical process to applied consistently to what are we, how do we define a disadvantaged community?
Thank you for that. That was my question. Hi, everyone. I'm Sherry. Thank you for a great presentation today. I was a little bit late coming from another meeting, but I appreciate the information that came forth. I'm from the Hudson Valley. I grew up in Poughkeepsie and Fishkill and have just moved back into the area. So I'm looking forward to, oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Oh, I said,
Oh, yeah,
just
yeah.
okay, gotcha.
Hudson Valley Pride. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting more involved with Sustain Hudson Valley. I'm working in the field right now. And so it's good to see what you all are doing, and I'm excited to support the work any way I can.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, I will follow up with each and every one of you. And I can't thank you enough. And it's personally been so helpful to have a group of people kind of, in many cases, coming back every day and bringing your intelligence and your feedback, because we are building this narrative out. And I am pretty much done beating myself up for how long it's taken, and pretty well into being happy that we are coming up with a kind of depth of analysis that a kind of community of practice could coalesce around. And that's what I think we've really been doing. So, any concluding thoughts?
Great job. Thank you very much, Melissa. Very nice at pulling together a lot of these threads that I had out there dangling, and to every now and then bring them back in to the picture.
Oh, cool. Well, actually, you know what? We could put some endorsements up on the website. If anybody wanted to just bang out something sweet and loving while it's fresh in your mind, we'll do that. And I am going to gift you all with 6 minutes before the top of the hour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.